She's a fashion blogger, model, and entrepreneur.
She's amazing.
The latest tips on fashion, beauty, wellness, travel, and her lifestyle. And now, here's the founder and creator of Not Basic Blonde, Olyasha.
Hi, Ben. Welcome to Not Basic Blonde Podcast. So glad to have you on my show.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being my guest. And you have such an amazing expertise. You graduated from Columbia University. So would you please tell us more about your career? How did you start it?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. So basically, long story short, I studied psychology in undergrad. And during my time in school, I had a job as a biofeedback technician at a substance abuse and treatment center facility. And so basically all day I was hooking people up to electrodes, and they were doing this program where their brain activity was being monitored in real time, and that activity was being sort of fed into the computer, and they would watch something on the computer, so usually like a movie, and depending on what their brain was doing, the movie would shrink or enlarge, and basically give the patient like real-time feedback based on whatever symptoms they're having. So for instance, if someone had ADHD, they could do this treatment, and whenever the computer would detect them kind of not focusing or losing steam cognitively, then like the movie would shrink. And so over time, people would kind of learn how to control their own brain waves in a way. And so I was doing this in undergrad, and I was so passionate about it, but I really felt like I needed more of a hard science background. So I applied to a program at Columbia, and I got in, and I basically made my area of study neuromodulation. So all of these sort of non-invasive but non-traditional way to create real changes in the brain. That's where I was exposed to TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a really effective treatment for depression and anxiety. And then I started my own center that really specializes in creating personalized treatment plans for mental health disorders. I'm not sure if I rambled there. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely did. And of course, I have more questions. And I know you also mentioned before, and from your bio, I know that you had and struggled with depression and ADHD. So you had these conditions on your own, and how did you overcome it? How did you cure it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think cure is probably a pretty strong word to use in this case. But, for me, like growing up, I had pretty severe depression, starting at a pretty young age in childhood, and pretty severe anxiety. But really, it was all sort of being led by my ADHD. So I was kind of the stereotypical inattentive, distractible student where, I would zone out immediately during class. I was completely disorganized. I was the kid who put his homework in his pocket or just shoved it into his backpack and lost it 5 minutes later. And it was really only until I got a formal testing after I finished high school when I was about 20 years old, and they said that I had the most severe adult ADHD she had ever seen in her life as a neuropsychologist. So, that experience ultimately kind of led me on somewhat of a journey of self-discovery, where I really realized that a lot of my depression and anxiety was ultimately kind of controlled by my ADHD. And the more I learned about what ADHD looks like and how I can best use the strengths of the disease to my advantage and sort of mask or control my weaknesses as much as possible, then I could be, and that's kind of how I've figured out how to successfully manage it as an adult, is just really identifying like what are my strengths and weaknesses, and what can I do to work on the weaknesses, or can I, now I'm at a point where I own my own business, and so I can, I have like an administrative team that basically specializes in all the things that I'm horrible at. And I think I've learned how to kind of use like the distractibility to my advantages in a way where I let myself kind of play around with different ideas and look at different avenues from like business and kind of overall healthcare perspective.
Well, what helped you the most? Did you have to actually get therapy or medication or any special treatments, or how did you handle it?
So personally, I tried every single medication for ADHD that has ever existed. Unfortunately, I've just been completely unable to tolerate them. I get pretty bad side effects from all of the medications. So I've had to deal with non-medicated solutions. I did neurofeedback myself. I've done probably 100 sessions of neurofeedback. That has been very helpful. It allowed me to increase my cognitive flexibility in a lot of ways, where it kind of let me be able to switch on that focus when I need it to be there, but it didn't take anything away from my regular life. Whereas like the stimulant medications, it felt like I wasn't me when I took them. So that's why I don't like them. Therapy itself ultimately wasn't particularly effective for the ADHD, but I did have a therapist who was experienced in ADHD, and that I think really helped me explore like some of the negative self-talk that I've had internally for the past few decades, because when school is kind of like the only barometer for success that you have when you're young, right? So for kids, when they don't do well in school, ultimately there's a lot of internalized guilt and shame and kind of like, why am I different? Am I stupid? And I think that a lot of people don't realize this, but those thoughts persist in your adult life unless you kind of face them head on. So for me, it was all about kind of recognizing when to believe in myself, when I'm hearing that's those cyclical thoughts of like you can't do it, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, and just being able to not turn them off, because I don't think that's possible, but just ignore them.
I see. I struggled with anxiety myself, and it was pretty bad. And the thing is, here, well, usually when you have anxiety, they actually justify it or just like diagnose it as depression. But I was like, I'm depressed. I'm just like anxious. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drive. I just couldn't be by myself because I don't know, I had this constant panic attacks and this, heart palpitations. And I went through so much therapy, and all of this caused by just stress and just the amount of stress I had. And I guess because I asked, they had to put me in a low dose of like antidepressant, but I did not, on the like minimum dose. So I had to take that for like a year and a half, but then still like had to get over it myself too. I had to like conquer my fears and learn how to deal with it, because they don't really give you any cure. And in other countries, comparing to US, they usually don't give you antidepressant. They're not in a rush. They will give you so many different techniques to just conquer it on your own and just try to do it without any medicine, because there is such a huge shame about taking the medicine and, oh, you're depressed? No way. There is such a thing like depression. Like, go do something. How can you do something when you're anxious and all you think about is like, I'm gonna die? Like, do I need to call ambulance? Because that feeling when you have a panic attack, that's the only thing on your mind, because your heart is racing like 135. I went to even emergency rooms a few times, and they told me to go home. They just left me just let me sit there for like
Right.
minutes. I was like, well, you guys do something? They're like, no.
And it feels like you're gonna die, right?
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah.
And it was to the point where I lost so much weight. I lost like 20 pounds because I just couldn't eat. I had no appetite, like zero. I
Mhm.
couldn't look at food at all. Like I would just look at it and just like not even want to eat. So
Yeah.
then I like, they had to do something about it. But then and it went back to normal, but I still had to learn how to conquer my fears, how to face them. And it was the hardest part when you're like all shaken, but you're still doing what you're afraid of.
Mhm.
Crazy.
So what ended up helping you?
Well, I had to be like on Celexa, very, very low dose of Celexa, but
Mhm.
it on the top of it, of course, change my diet and work out more and try to reduce stress and get more sleep. But otherwise, it's usually, I mean, they could not provide me any solution. But I was like, well, how you guys do it without any medicine? And they were like, well,
Right.
the doctor himself telling me, well, I've been on medicine for 15 years. So they don't
Yeah.
have any solution to do it without.
Unfortunately, most doctors in this country don't really have many non-pharmaceutical interventions for anxiety specifically. I mean, there's like benzodiazepines, which have historically been completely overprescribed, and doctors are now trying their best not to prescribe them. So they're kind of left with just antidepressants, which can be helpful somewhat, but ultimately, usually there's more to be done. Usually you have to kind of look at your life, reduce stress, and exercise and things like that. But it's hard to do those things when your heart is racing 140 beats per minute, right? And you feel like you're gonna die. It's telling someone to go work out will fall on deaf ears most of the time, unfortunately. That's really why I got interested in these non-pharmaceutical approaches, is because ultimately these disorders are all brain-based, right? They all, the brain is what controls anxiety, it controls your mood, it controls depression and happiness. And so if you're not really working directly on the brain, then what are you doing?
I agree. And also, some people have it almost when they were born, like since they're a kid. For me, it was like only past few years, so it was very new and I never had any problems with it. So then it's like, quick fix with something very, very low dose could be helpful. But what about those who can even do that? That's different question. So what is TMS method? What is it? What did you invent it?
Yeah. So I didn't invent it, but I do a lot of it. So TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a mouthful, and it basically is a device that creates this magnetic field that can turn on specific parts of the brain that are underactive in depression and anxiety. So we typically think of when we think of depression, there's a really common theory called like the serotonin hypothesis, which basically states that depression is a result of low serotonin in the brain or some kind of neurotransmitter imbalance. But if that were the case, SSRIs, like the most common type of antidepressants, would work for everyone. And the reality is they don't. They work probably 40% of the time. And so what really happens, and the neuroscience has showed this repeatedly over the past few decades, is that these specific parts of the brain are underactive. So specifically the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is right here, is underactive in depression, meaning that there's less total blood oxygenation, less glucose metabolism, that's all happening in that area. And what TMS does is it creates this magnetic field, and by that magnetic field turns on that part of the brain again. So people come in 5 days a week for about 6 weeks, and session by session they start feeling a little bit better, and it's because this part of the brain is literally getting back online. So it's increasing neuroplasticity, you're increasing blood flow, you're increasing oxygenation. And it's really that process that ends up really reducing the symptoms of depression in a lot of people.
Very interesting. And it only can be done at the clinic, like at your clinic at a location, or it can be done remotely too.
Yeah, so TMS specifically can only be done in clinic settings because it's a pretty large machine. It's not mobile in any way. It looks kind of like an old computer from the 80s, like a refrigerator sized machine. So there are no take-home devices. You do have to do it in the office.
Is that like hyperbaric chamber or similar to that?
It's a little bit different. You know, hyperbaric chambers, I believe they changed the pressure and oxygen level of the tank that people are inside of. But with TMS, you actually sit on a chair. You're not inside of anything, but we do put the actual device on patients' heads. So they sit there, and you're able to talk and watch a movie potentially during the actual treatment, but you don't go inside of anything.
Oh, I see. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
How effective is TMS compared to antidepressants?
So antidepressants have about a 40% probability of reducing the symptoms of depression the first time one tries them. However, if you fail an antidepressant, then your probability of getting relief from the next one you try is decreased by about 50%. So by the time you've tried 3-4 different medications, the probability that an antidepressant will work for you is around 5% or less. TMS, on the other hand, has a success rate of about 80 to 90%, depending on the study and the criteria. Usually in the clinic, the studies will show about 66 to 75%. In our clinics, we notice that we just have better efficacy because we don't have the restrictions of a clinical trial. We can personalize the treatment to each person. And so I'd say success is usually about 80 to 90% in the people that we see, and they can achieve full remission probably 50% of the time, no matter how treatment resistant they've been in the past.
And that's very impressive. And they actually get, how long does it take for them to see the results and to feel better?
That's a good question. So there are three sort of categories of responders. There are people who are what we call early responders. So within the first week, they are in full remission. They feel amazing. It's been, a complete 180 over like 5 days. And then there are the more linear responders. So week 1, they probably won't notice any changes. Week 2, maybe things are getting a little brighter. Maybe they have a little more energy, or maybe their sleep's getting a little better. And then they'll kind of feel better and better throughout the treatment. Sometimes it's not so linear, where maybe they'll feel better for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then they'll crash at like week 5, and then week 6 they'll feel better again. Sometimes we do see that. And then finally, and that's kind of the majority of people, is like the more linear responders. And then there's about 10% of people who are what we call late responders. And those people, they come in, they're diligent 5 days a week, every single week, and they don't notice any changes until they've done 30 or so sessions. And then it's like, oh my God, they notice like huge changes at the very end. And those changes usually continue to increase over the next few months after they've stopped TMS.
So it depends on the person how they adapt to it, like how it works for them.
Mhm.
How can you identify, like, do you have any testing kind of done, or how do you know that how it will work for them, or only by doing it you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell it's hard to tell until someone starts how soon they'll be able to respond. In general, though, we can tell, we do like various types of testing every week. I mean, we have a technician check in on them every single day. And then on a weekly basis, we administer like scientifically validated mood questionnaires. So that becomes helpful for us to look at as well in terms of like, are their scores getting lower every week, or is there variability? Are they pretty stable? But for the most part, people just have to start, and then it's kind of up to their brain to read the message correctly and work efficiently.
Do you know by your from your expertise, do you know that main causes that causes this condition? Like, example, like some doctors identified that all our immune system, everything happens in our gut, and
Yeah.
now there are so many theories that you have to take probiotics, and it actually impacts in a great way our mental health. And what do you think about this?
I think that there is a lot of hype surrounding the brain gut interaction. I think there's a lot of validity there. I don't necessarily, I haven't seen any particularly compelling evidence to suggest that it's kind of all in the gut, even though I know some people do operate under that assumption. But in general, it's kind of a multifaceted disorder where you have this genetic predisposition and you have environmental stress, and it's really the combination of the two, in addition to sort of how resilient you are, that ends leading to the symptoms of depression. And like when you look at the brain in people who are depressed, there's a very clear network and pattern of what that looks like. So for instance, like the hippocampus, which is a part of your brain responsible for memory consolidation and storage, is atrophied by about 9% on average for people with depression. So that's a really important part of your brain. And it shows us that depression isn't really, it's not really healthy for the brain in any way. And then when the hippocampus has this atrophied effect, it kind of, there's kind of this feedback loop that gets triggered with the amygdala, which helps to control your stress response. So that ends up becoming overactive. And then all of a sudden, any environmental stress you have is sort of compounded by all of the cortisol that your body is now producing because your amygdala is out of whack. And then that pathway also leads to this prefrontal cortex hypofunctionality as well.
Yeah, very interesting how it works. And you actually on the scan, like you explained, all the parts of brain that some of them are not even functioning well. I mean, anxiety and depression is bad for overall health. That's why they tell you that you can't be in this kind of condition. You can't keep your body under this kind of stress. So you have to like manage right away. But with TMS treatments, how long and how often do you need to do that? Is it like a course, you do a few and then you stop, or you have to constantly do them?
Yeah, most people do a minimum course and then they kind of see how it goes and play it by ear. So it's usually what people do is they'll do 36 sessions over about 8 to 9 weeks. So 5 days a week for 6 weeks, and then the next 2 to 3 weeks just kind of spread out 6 additional sessions. And then about 90% of people, that's all they need, just that one course. But for some people, they do benefit from additional sessions. So sometimes people do an additional course in 60 to 90 days if they feel like they weren't able to get enough relief the first time. And sometimes people also come in for maintenance sessions, like maybe once a month or once every 2 weeks, just depending on kind of how their brain metabolizes the signal that it's getting. But the vast majority of people are able to just do the course straight through, and that's all they need in life.
Oh, so it would be actually enough for a lifetime. You don't have to constantly come and do it like, every year, every month.
Correct. It depends on the person, but I've seen, the vast majority of the people that we treat, they just do one course and that's all they need. But depression is, something that is episodic in nature, right? It kind of ebbs and flows throughout the lifetime. So for some people, it can also reduce the severity of future depressive episodes. So if someone has like a history of pretty severe depression, maybe they do TMS and it gets them out of the depression, and it makes any future episodes of depression a lot more mild than they otherwise would have been.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds magical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. People single day is wild. Like people come in who have tried like 10 to 20 different medications. They've been in therapy and nothing has worked for them. And then seeing them 2 weeks later after starting TMS and they're smiling and making jokes with people, it's like they've become a completely different person.
Yeah, so true. And what should we do? What's the best to do for mental health to avoid anxiety, depression? I mean, of course, sometimes it can be avoided, but in general, what are the great things to do for mental health?
So if someone, there are different behavioral strategies, right? So there are basic things that everyone's heard ad nauseum, right? Avoid stress. That's a tip that's ultimately not helpful for most people because stress is unavoidable in our society. Exercise and nutrition are two things that can be very important and stabilizing mood. For instance, avoiding any sugar is probably the most important nutritional piece that I could give to anyone who has a mood disorder, just because, the ebbs and flows of blood sugar are kind of exacerbated by any shifts in mood. So people who are more prone to depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder, they tend to be much more sensitive to those swings in blood sugar. And so the lows, like a few hours after having sugar, will be a lot more severe for people with mood disorders. Exercise is helpful. Really any type is helpful. And at the very least, trying to get steps in every day, get 2,500 steps, 5,000, 10,000 steps. The more steps you can get in every day, the better. And then, trying to regulate sleep as much as possible too. Having really good sleep hygiene, making sure that you're limiting blue light at night and you have night shift turned on if you have an iPhone, or that you're not taking things like Benadryl or NyQuil or any OTC sleep product to go to sleep every single night.
That's a great advice, and especially sleep. I know sleep is very important, and I know when I don't have enough sleep, it gets me sometimes. So
yeah,
number one for everyone, I guess.
Absolutely, it's so important for your mood and for your brain health in general. And unfortunately, a lot of people with depression, for instance, impaired sleep is one of the symptoms of depression, but it's also something that can very much increase all of your external stressors in life. So it can make you more prone to depression as well if your sleep is very dysregulated.
So true. What inspired you to do the TMS office in Los Angeles? Why did you choose the location? Because you're located there, or?
So I kind of grew up split between LA and New York. At the time when I decided to start this, I was actually living in New York. I had recently finished graduate school, but I knew some people professionally in Los Angeles, and I thought that it would be, I thought that the opportunity was better in Los Angeles ultimately. And I just, at the time, like, there were TMS centers alone, there were ketamine centers alone. There was no one who was really doing like a full service of mental health services. It was more like just kind of one provider here, one provider here, one provider here. So I really wanted, I just love this idea of like a personalized treatment plan and really doubling down on personalizing every single aspect of the treatment. And it just seemed like LA was better to do that.
Yeah, everyone is very concerned about health and wellness there and eating healthy and all that. So
Yeah, definitely.
I wish it would be more spread out in US like that, not just there.
I know, it's unfortunate. Where are you based?
I'm in Atlanta, but I love LA. I come there to visit sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like more LA type, but I guess I'm in Atlanta for now. And before all this pandemic happened, I wanted to move there, but then now everyone is moving out from there. So
Yeah, they're all moving to Atlanta, right?
no, I'm here in Atlanta, but I'm still thinking, well, yeah, to move out from Atlanta somewhere.
What brought you to Atlanta?
Oh, they're part of my family.
Mm.
What was your experience starting TMS Center? Did you have any challenges, and how did you decide to do it?
Yeah, challenges would be an understatement. There were challenges every step of the way. In the very beginning, this kind of was just an idea. And there was one point where it was like me in a room with a TMS machine and, a doctor in the next room over. And I just had to kind of figure it out and figure out basically everything from A to Z, how to create the administrative systems, what the best marketing plan is going to be, how to efficiently test different strategies, how to manage the finances. So and then staffing was so hard in the very beginning. And now I'm blessed to have like an amazing team behind me. But in the beginning, these were all major challenges that I faced.
Always it's hard to start something new and actually dive into industry.
Right.
Anything you start, it's always hard, but then when you learn it and you're in it, then it becomes easier.
Absolutely. Yeah. And LA is, it's pretty competitive for TMS here. Like, we're definitely not the only people doing TMS. I will say we're the only people who I think are really personalizing the TMS protocols in a high quality way. But it's, to be where we are now, where we're kind of one of the few known names in the TMS world in LA. Is just really amazing to see, because if you Google us, like, we have 5-star reviews, we're at the top of page 1, and it was a really long and hard road to get where we are today.
That's incredible. I admire you guys. That's amazing that what you do.
Thank you.
I know it's probably not, but do you think depression can be permanently cured with TMS, or there is a chance? I mean, of course, it depends on everyone, life circumstances, and I mean, events they're going through in life, but overall.
Yeah, I mean, in science and generally in medicine, we try to avoid the use of the term cure. But, like I said, depression it's episodic. So it comes and goes throughout the lifetime. It can definitely get people out of their current depressive episodes, and it does a fantastic job of that. And it can certainly prevent and or reduce future episodes from happening.
I see. What success stories have you guys had? Any major?
Everything. I mean, one of our first patients, and I was doing TMS in grad school and before we opened, but I remember when we first opened TMS in Brain Health, we had one patient who She was in her late 20s. She hadn't been working for 2 years because her mental health was just wasn't in a good place mentally. So she had taken a break from working. She had been diagnosed as depressed. She had severe anxiety. She had severe OCD, and she was such a talented woman too. So she, with her, we did like an initial protocol of TMS, and it started really helping her a lot, but her sleep and her anxiety were still somewhat problematic. So then we added in another protocol that treats a different part of the head. And that's really what helped get her into full remission. And within 3 weeks, she had started working again. She was like going back to school. It was just a really amazing transformation that shows how big of a jump TMS can really help people make.
It's magical, and actually when you hear probably this kind of stories, it gives you even more motivation and even probably inspires you even more, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And where can our listeners find you, your center, where is it located, and your social handles?
Yeah. So our website is tmsbrainhealth.com. We currently have clinics in LA. We have 2 offices in LA. We have an office in Sedona, Arizona, and another in Las Vegas. And you can call or text us anytime. Our phone number is 833-867-2329.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ben, for being my guest. Thank you for sharing.
Of course. Thanks for having me.